Camera. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the BYP Legal Tech launch. My name's Karima Campbell, and I'm the Chief Activator. So I'm really excited to have you all here today with us, and we're excited to tell you about who BYP are, who BYP Legal Tech are, and have a fireside chat with Kenya Parish Dixon as well. So, BYP. BYP stands for the Black Young Professionals, and we're a network that was founded in 2016 after the Black Lives Matter protest. So the BYP network was founded to harness the power of the Black community. And so with over 50,000 members and a reach to 150,000 members, the focus is on working with existing Black networks and businesses to change the Black narrative. So one of the ways we will be able to help change the Black narrative is by advancing the careers of the Black professionals using our career advancement platform, Javelin, which I'll have a link to shortly where you can sign up to as well. And empowering Black professionals around the world to connect with each other and global corporations to find mentors, jobs, and knowledge share. And we really want to help organizations to attract, engage, recruit, and retain Black talent of all experience levels. And so some of the things that we do to help this include an annual leadership conference with over 2,000 Black professionals and speakers, a mentorship program, and we also work with over 1,000 corporations. And here's just an example of some of the companies that we've worked with. We've also got on this slide some of the publications and news outlets which we've featured in as well. The growth and success of BYP is largely down to the passion of the founder, Kike. She had it when she started BYP as a side hustle back in 2016, and she did that after realizing representation across industries was a problem. So this is now a full-time business, and as a result of historic $1 million crowdfunding that happened in 2020, the team been able to grow by tenfold, and we've been able to double down the efforts in changing the Black narrative. So before I talk about BYP Legal Tech, I'm going to leave this on the screen for a second, as I mentioned, so you can sign up to Javelin, take out your phones, give this a scan. You can sign up later after you just keep this in your browser, and ultimately join Javelin to aid in the advancement of your career. And as mentioned in the chat, feel free to introduce yourself and where you're joining from as we continue. Feel free to add your LinkedIn profile and join our LinkedIn group as well. All right, so BYP Legal Tech. BYP Legal Tech is one of the most recent chapters to join the BYP family. And in line with the mission and vision of BYP, we're focused on helping the legal tech professionals around the globe to connect with each other, find mentors, share knowledge, and further our careers. So I know many of the people on the call today are specialists in specific areas, some of which are on the screen, but we decided to group ourselves as legal tech, as more often than not, at some point in our day, our skill sets using technology to deliver legal services. And that's the very definition of legal tech professionals. So me, myself, I fall into the e-discovery category. So I'll actually tell you a bit more about me as well. I've got over 12 years of experience in e-discovery. I started in the password cracking and document conversion team at a service provider. I then moved into project management and consulting, and I now lead the customer success management team for Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Relativity. I've got a huge passion for inclusion, diversity, equity, and belonging, and particularly with a focus on race, gender, and education. And that's mainly just because I'm fed up of going to events and meetings and not seeing many people like me. So I thought, how can I make this change? So trying to increase our presence and visibility, I took on the role as the membership director for the first Women in E-Discovery chapter in London. And I also started Black Tech Queens at the start of the pandemic to inspire more people to get into the industry, to help those already in the industry to achieve their aspirations, and to celebrate all of our achievements. And then, as you know, most recently, I've taken on the role of Chief Activator at BYP Legal Tech. So, as said here, I have some accolades, but I must still say that hearing from someone who I've inspired to get into technology, or even better still, into legal tech, outweighs all of that. It outweighs any kind of awards or anything you could be given. Okay. And welcome, Anissa. Great to have some US colleagues here as well. So we've got people in the US, we've got people in the UK. It's great to see. So as it says on the you see more about me at KarimaCampbell.com. And to keep up to date with BYP Legal Tech, you can check out our social media pages. So we're on Instagram and LinkedIn. And if you've got any comments, feedback, or if you want to get involved with BYP Legal Tech as a champion, for example, feel free to drop us an email as well. And you'll get an email from us at the end asking for feedback. And if you'd like to be added to our mailing list, and so that's another way to keep in touch with us. Oh. Great. So I know many of you have joined for this particular reason, and I'm just going to cut straight to the chase. I think it's very fair to say that I'm excited to speak to today's guest. She's formerly the Director of White House Information Governance for the Executive Office of the President, where she oversaw the e-discovery, Freedom of Information Act Unit, Digital Forensics Unit, Digital Forensics Lab, Records Management Unit, and Information Assurance. She's barred in the District of Columbia. She holds the Association of Corporate Counsel in-house certification. She's got NARA Certificate of Federal Records Management, and she became a certified e-discovery specialist in 2012. So allow me to introduce the legend that is Kenya Parish Dixon. Welcome, Kenya.
Oh, good afternoon, Karima. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I appreciate it.
It's very much deserved. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that everyone can see you clearly and we can have this conversation. Stop sharing. There you go. Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. Well, I know you're a super busy person, and I just really appreciate that when I reached out to you about this, there was no question about, oh, I'm going to have to make time in my diary. It was just a straight, yes, I'm doing this. And so it's see. Thanks. So I know I gave a little intro there, but I want to start by just letting you introduce yourself in your own words. I want to hear, who is Kenya Parish Dixon?
Oh my, I think you did a pretty good job on the career side. I'm just a lawyer who fell into technology. I'm a mother. I have a 22-year-old, soon to be 23-year-old, who declined to come and listen to this, by the way.
I think the recording.
And I currently, she doesn't find any of the work that I've done to be interesting or impressive. And now I'm a consultant, a vice president and an assistant general counsel in a company that my organization joined earlier this year. And prior to that, I was the general counsel and chief operating officer for a tech startup in this space. And so I've been around the block a little bit. I came out of law school in the 1800s, it feels like, and practiced law for a number of years. I was a litigator, a big firm litigator. I was at Epstein, Becker and Green, not once, but twice. It's a lovely firm, and I enjoyed practicing there. I spent some time at McDermott, Will and Emery, and then I went to Lockheed Martin, spent some time at Lockheed Martin, and that's where I kind of got my technology chops. And then ended up in the federal government. I was trying to get them as a client, and they were trying to get me as an employee. The government won. And so I ended up working on federal records management and information governance for the FDIC. The FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. It is the federal agency in the United States that holds up the banks. So I like to say that they are the insurer of the banks and all of the deposits within a bank up to a certain threshold, but they also evaluate the banks to make sure that they're safe and steady. And if they're not, they go in and take over the bank and either sell it or run it until the bank can be stabilized or its assets can be moved. The FDIC was created in, I believe, 1933, and not a single American has lost a nickel in a FDIC insured bank since the FDIC was created. So it's a very impressive organization. I went from there to the Federal Trade Commission as a supervisory attorney and an assistant director for a division that is also in this industry. And so we had e-discovery and forensics and the undercover lab and research and writing and a bunch of different departments and divisions there. And we basically built that division and pushed the agency's data into the cloud. And that was quite an accomplishment and a feat. And while my stated expertise was kind of e-discovery, forensics, litigation, that's where I began to learn and understand cybersecurity. And so I always say to people, you have to be really flexible. Like you have to just bend yourself up in knots to learn whatever is thrown at you. And that's how you can continue to grow. So the cybersecurity piece, for those of you who are not in the United States, the Federal Trade Commission is a consumer protection agency that is designed to protect you from the actions of corporations and fraud against consumers. But it also is the cybersecurity watchdog. So if you are a corporation that serves the public and you are breached due to your own negligence, it is very likely that the Federal Trade Commission would investigate your actions. Knowing that while I was there, I was terrified that if I pushed this data in the cloud, this was back in 2015, 2016, that if the FTC was breached, that everyone would say, well, Kenya is the one who did that. And my name would be on the front page of the newspapers. So I had to learn cybersecurity. So, I was a litigator. I went to law school to learn the law. And basically you go to law school to pass the bar. You pass the bar, you start practicing and you learn your specialty. And along the way, I had to learn some e-discovery because it was new and litigators were having to figure that out. So I began to learn that. And I've been flexible all these years. So my career has basically gone where I've been pulled. It hasn't, I have seldom been seeking a particular type of job or something. I'm just pulled in a different direction or in a particular direction, and I go in that direction. I try to learn everything I can about that particular set of responsibilities.
Cool. So that's where I guess that's where you went into technology. But did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer growing up?
So it's an interesting question. When I was a little girl, my father said, "You're going to go to law school." And I said, no, I'm going to be a firefighter because I was a little girl. And he said, no, you're not. You're going to go to law school. And he continued to say that throughout much of my life. And eventually, because I was determined I was not going to go to law school, my grandmother said, who was in her 90s, said, well, what if you live to be 100? Because I kept saying, oh, another 3 years of school, it'd be another 3 years. So I kept complaining about the 3 years. And she was like, what if you live to be 100? What's 3 years? And that really made me understand, okay, go ahead and go to law school. And my father was right. His concern was he wanted me to have a profession where once I passed the bar and I was a licensed attorney, that's something that couldn't be taken away from me. So even if no one would give me a job, I could hang a shingle and practice law. And so I think he wanted for me what we all want for our children is the best chance at survival and being successful and productive in life. And so I just did what my father told me to do. That's how I became a lawyer. That is not working with my daughter, because I told her to be a physicist and sent her to college for physics, and she is bucking that as we speak. So it doesn't.
You know what she wants to do?
Hmm?
You know what she wants to do?
She says she wants to teach some sort of museum studies in museums. I'm not certain I think of it as a docent. She has corrected me on more than one occasion that it's not a docent, that there is an educator sort of place in museums where you educate children in the public and schools and all of that on, I guess, whatever the museum holdings are. And so she seems to be interested in that. And so I expect at any time to be told that she's going to go to graduate school in museum studies or something like that. So the physics, I didn't win with the physics.
But you never know, it's going to end up with good for her. She's got you as a role model. So there you go.
Yeah, you know what happens with lawyers and doctors and engineers? Their kids say, I don't want to do that because you worked all the time. I don't want to do what you're doing because you work all the time. And I try to tell my daughter, and I tell younger people this: you have two lives, one where you work and one where you don't. And it's called work for a reason. It's actually work. It's not about, oh, this is, the chasing my passion thing. I don't know what I now know what my passion is as I've gotten older, but I don't think I knew it. I'm not one of those people who, as a 3-year-old, knew exactly what I wanted to do. I had no idea. So I did what I was told to do, and that's worked out rather well. And in my spare time, I do the things that I'm passionate about.
Cool. No, good. And do you see that your current role allows you to have your life as well? Or I know this industry can be very much go, go, go all the time.
Yeah, I think I think what happens in a person's life is what they make happen. So for a number of years, for instance, I golfed every single weekend, and probably 2 days after work, I would go and do 9 holes. I did that every chance I got because I was an avid golfer for a number of years. And then my daughter decided to join a crew team in high school. That was that. We couldn't both do, she had to be on the riverfront every single weekend. So I wasn't going golfing. So I haven't golfed since she turned 14. And that, I think that I had to make a choice that I was going to be with her where she was going to be, or I was going to do that. But I made the time to golf. And in my mind, I said, well, this is what business people do. They golf too. So this is also work. It wasn't really work.
The golf course is the best place to network. So it's good.
That's what they say, but I didn't find that to be true. I think you network where you want to network. I have other hobbies and things that I like to do. Among them is watching, some Netflix. Sometimes I'm just exhausted. I fall across the bed and I'm just going to watch television.
Yeah.
I think you have to be intentional about networking regardless of where you are. And so golf may be it for certain types of people, but it may not be it for us. It certainly was not. There was that type. I didn't encounter that type of networking on the golf course. Things may be different now. It's been a number of years. We'll see. But I do a lot of networking that has nothing to do with golf and nothing to do with the hobbies that I have.
Yeah. So is that mainly like actually going to networking events that you do?
Yes, I joined an organization earlier this year in the United States called Chief. I believe that there is a Chief in the UK. I just joined this March. And they have networking events. Some are virtual, some are in person. They have like a clubhouse, so you can go to those activities. They have a number of activities with women who are C-suite executives. And so I do a lot of that. I attend as many of those events as I can. The virtual ones are easier to attend, but I also belong to a number of organizations. And I try to give some face time to each of those organizations. I try to write articles for them. I try to help plan events, sponsor events. I try to do whatever I can for the organizations that I sit where I sit on a board. And so that gives me an opportunity to network with the people on the board and with the members of those organizations. I've gotten to know a number of people through those events. And I find that I have to sometimes be intentional about networking. So, for instance, I will reach out to someone and say, hey, we're in a similar field, or, I think you're in my area, or I think you live in my community. Would you like to have coffee, lunch, or dinner? And all women never say no. They always say, yes, I would love to. And even when I reach out to people that are across the country, if they know they're going to be traveling to the city that I'm in, they'll say, when I'm in town, let's get together. And so I have to remember to be intentional about reaching out to people and making connections because I'm somewhat introverted. And so I don't have a problem staying home. I could stay home for 3-4 days and not leave the house. This work from home thing is great.
Oh, cool. Going back to going all the way back to golf, actually, you're a woman after my own heart because I find my most peaceful time is a Friday. I do the back 9 holes at my course, and that's just me. I would just go by myself and just have some me time. So,
Really? Good for you. Good for you. All I can say is I hope you're wearing good sunscreen.
Yeah.
Because this year I got sunburned twice, and I haven't been sunburned since I was 12 years old. So the sun has really changed. But good for you. I think self-care is one of the most important things we can do for ourselves. So if there's something that you enjoy, anything that you enjoy, finding some time either alone or with people that you enjoy being with is so important. It's important for mental health, emotional health, and for physical health.
Absolutely. And on the networking at golf, so I've actually found, unfortunately, I'm actually the only Black woman in my club, and so I have a lot of people drawn to me because they kind of want to know, oh my God, what are you? And so it allows me to network a bit more, and I've had a couple of opportunities come out of that. Did you find that being part of the golf club or even any of the networks that you mentioned that you are often the only one?
Well, yes, but I grew up the only one. And so I often and I am often unaware when I am the only person. So when it comes to golf, I have often been the only person of color or Black woman in attendance. I joined a golf association. Here we had an association called ASGA, and I joined it. And so they pair you up with people. And so I made a friend there, and she and I always, golf together, and we had lots of fun. And so we always would pair up together, and then they would pair us up with, 2 other folks or 2 other guys, and, would be in their cart. We'd be in our cart. And so I often didn't think about the fact that I was the only one. I am often the only Black woman or Black person in most of the areas of my life and have been since I was very young. And so that's not an unusual feeling for me. And so because it's not unusual, I often lose sight of it, right? And so I have to be intentional about things like recruitment and about who I seek out for business and who I give assistance and help to, where I put resources. I have to be very intelligent because I don't want, intentional, because I don't want to be the only one in the room. And I don't think I don't know how it is in the UK, but I can tell you that here, Black women being the only one in the room is not unusual. There usually is just one of us. And when there's two, we look at each other and we smile, we nod, we wave, and then we get to know each other. And I have run into so many Black women in places, and we've given each other the look, and then we find a way to speak to each other. I recently, where I just bought a house, going into the clubhouse that's there was a Black woman who was also coming in, and I was like, oh. And then so we started talking, and we became, fast friends. That happens, I think. And I think that's very common. That's a very common thing, to seek out people that look like you, to see if there's a common experience and a sisterhood where you can find it.
Absolutely. I remember in my last role in our building, I think there was like 3,500 people. But whenever you walked past a Black person, you gave them the like the knowing nod, like, yeah.
That look that says, if I see you on an elevator and you're alone, we're going to chat.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's led to us like bringing each other in on opportunities, because I'm going to bring you along. I'm going to as you said, be intentional in seeking opportunities for you.
It's interesting because, since I don't know how aware you all are of what's been happening in this country. The country is going through some interesting shifts in a number of different areas, and it happens, right? We're approaching our 250th year. We just celebrated 247 years as a nation, and countries around, as they reach around 250 years, they start to have some issues because things have changed. Things have changed tremendously since our Constitution was drafted, and people are interpreting the Constitution in ways that both sides think is correct, and that the other side is incorrect, and so there's some tension there. And so, in 2020, when the pandemic hit here, we also had some very public things happen. We had an incident with a gentleman called George Floyd, where a gentleman was murdered on camera over the course of just about 10 minutes, slowly murdered, for the world to see. And then the news played the video over and over. It was quite traumatizing, but it was something that happens not too infrequently in this country. But it was caught on camera, and unfortunately, it was caught by minors on camera. So younger people were recording it, watching this man being murdered. And that spurred every generation there is this movement towards equality. And it spurred this DEI movement. And I had a number of friends who said, I'm going to go get a DEI certificate. I'm going to work on, becoming a DEI officer. And this is now going to become a C-suite position. And I said, well, I wouldn't do it that way, because this is a temporary thing. If anything, if history has shown us anything in the United States, it is that we take little leaps forward and then we take 2 leaps backwards. So I never thought the DEI movement in the United States would last longer than 2 years and a quarter. And I'm just being honest. And so you have to be, as an individual, very intentional about pulling people along. And so one of the ways that I do a lot of my own marketing for my organization is, when I meet a Black shareholder, a Black vendor, a Black executive, then I try to figure out who in my circle or my sphere of influence can I introduce them to. So I'm less about taking people to extravagant events and spending money that way. And I spend more of my time saying, look, I've met the general counsel of this company, and they're looking for someone who does X, you do X. Can I invite you to lunch? Because all of these Black shareholders will not be shareholders if they can't build business. If you can't bring in the business, then all these people in these executive positions will be lost. Yeah. And so it's not just for me about hiring Black vendors. I do that too. It's not just about hiring Black employees. My entire team were minorities. They weren't all Black, but they were minorities when I brought them to this company. I am the only Black executive in the company. That's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for my company or any company in this country. And so I seek out shareholders, partners, associates that are Black and Brown and Jewish, and try very hard to make sure that we're making connections and working together. And I think, because the theory is a rising tide lifts all boats. So if I'm helping 2 or 3 people make the connections and make the business, then all of us will rise. And I think that's how I see business development. I see it less as I'm going to take you to lunch and ask you for business. I do that too, but I'm going to take you to lunch and we're going to make some connections. Who do you know? This is who I know. This is how we can pull that together. Eventually there'll be work and we'll all have work.
And there's strength in numbers at the end of the day. So.
And the numbers have to be green numbers.
Exactly.
I can't speak for the way things work in other countries, but the United States of America is a capitalist country. Mm-hmm. And the thing that speaks louder than anything else, I believe, is dollars.
Yeah.
Money really outdoes and overdoes almost everything.
Absolutely. And everything you said just now about often being like the only one and stuff, that is not just unique to the US. It is very much what we see over here. There's hardly any people of color in C-suite positions, and it's something that definitely stands out quite a bit. So.
And there are different rules for us, right? We had a Black president, and we were very proud of our Black president. We still love and adore him, but the public should take note of the fact that he never lost his temper and never raised his voice at people, because that's a no-no. We're all human. Everyone loses their temper. Everybody gets angry. Everyone loses their voice. But in his position, that's something he wouldn't be allowed to do. And Absolutely. Dare I say, all the other 40 plus presidents have been screamers. All the rest of them yell and scream at people because the job is an impossible job to do. How you do it without raising your voice is to me, unfathomable. But Barack Obama managed to do it. And so that's a feat unto itself. If he hadn't gotten anything else right, that's a feat all by itself.
It's funny you mention him, because that was a milestone, not just for the US, for everyone globally. And you got to work in his office. Like, how was that? What was it like?
Oh, Karima. So now I have to disabuse you of the notion that I worked in Obama's office. I was in the government. I was pulled into the government when Obama was president. But when I went into the White House, someone else was president. So when I went in as a director, which was a non-political position, I was pulled in by the Trump organization. And the reason I was, and then people go, "What?" I remember when I got the job offer, my daughter said, "Can't you go work for Obama?" And I said, "Well, honey, Obama's no longer the president, and Obama didn't need me, and Obama never asked me to come work for him." So the interesting thing is about my transition from the Federal Trade Commission into the White House is I was put on loan to the White House, and that happens. It's called a detail. So in the United States, you can take any federal employee can be detailed to another office to assist. The White House uses that feature in order to get highly skilled employees to come into the White House for a term. Okay. And so typically it's 6 months. It can be extended for a year. The agency pays for you to go, you stay, and then you go back to your agency. So that's what I was supposed to be doing, going over for 6 months to help build an infrastructure that the White House doesn't normally have. So the White House is not a litigating entity normally. It is an entity that if someone sues the president, the Department of Justice will handle that. And so DOJ is its own entity and it will handle the lawsuit by coordinating with the White House personnel who are necessary to support that function. That administration was a little different because it was getting hundreds of subpoenas from Congress, and it was not prepared to handle that. It was getting FOIA requests, congressional subpoenas, litigation subpoenas. It was becoming an entity that was under siege for litigation, and it did not have the infrastructure to support that. And so I put this infrastructure in place at the Federal Trade Commission, and someone texted me and said, we've lost someone here who would be instrumental in helping us with this, and we were wondering if you'd be interested in coming over and helping us. And I said, sure.
Yeah.
You don't turn down the White House anyway. Like this idea that, I would never go work for this president or that president, that's ridiculous. If you're a federal employee, there's a mission, you are there to serve and to uphold a mission, and it doesn't matter what administration is in office. So I said yes, and went to build this infrastructure. And it was a really interesting experience. I mean, it's still an interesting experience, as the experience is not yet over for many people.
So it's so funny when you say detail. In my head, that's just like Secret Service is detailing.
Right. And Secret Service detail. Well, I think it is the same use of the word detail. I could be wrong, but I think you could be detailed to Secret Service from, to the White House in Secret Service from another Secret Service appointment or position, I think. But in the federal government, you can get detailed all over the government. And I think the same holds true for the military here. So I was being detailed, but a month in, my boss said, you're not going back, you're staying here. And I was like, oh, okay. So, that's how you get informed that you're not going back to your home agency. And I was fine with that. I was fine.
Cool. So what made you move on then?
Well, so the White House is a very interesting place. It's fast moving. Everything you do impacts not just your little department or division or branch. It really impacts the nation, and by extrapolation, in some respects, impacts the world. That's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. Things are fast moving. There's a lot of politics. So whereas you're there to fulfill a mission, there are political concerns. I'll give you an example. I worked with a CISO, a CIO, and a DWIT, Director of White House Information Technology, who weren't always on the same page about technical strategies at the time. And that happens, right? It always happens where people have different ideas about how things should happen. And there was some talk about changing the title of one of the individuals. And I remember thinking, you can do that, but then you're going to have to answer to the press secretary when the media asks, was the White House did something happen at the White House? Because you're sending a message to the public with everything that happens. So as you go to make day-to-day decisions, some of them good, some of them bad, some of them you don't have any idea what the impact is going to be, there are reverberations that you almost cannot calculate. And so as you start thinking, 10 paces ahead, if I do this today, will there be a message sent? Another example is we built a lab because we had to preserve data, because data had to be preserved for ultimately transition, but also to respond to subpoenas and to litigation and to FOIA requests and all of that. And so we built a lab to collect that information. Typically, and previously, the military had its own network, responsibility for gathering data. They were unaware of this lab that we had built. And so someone from a vendor shop tweeted that they had been to the White House and gotten a contract, which you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to discuss what contracts and work that you do in the White House. And it's a regular ongoing thing where you're asking vendors and companies to please take down a tweet or a Facebook post, or, you can't market or advertise that you're doing this particular type of work because we don't want the public to know what tools and resources that we're using.
Yeah.
And the military contacted us and said, "What are you doing with a lab?" And my response was, "The White House doesn't work for the military. The military works for the White House." That's not how that goes.
Yeah.
But were looking at a tweet and wanted to know how this is a very different protocol. Why is that happening? And it's happening because times change and the volume of data changes and the number of assets that people have. You have a phone, maybe you have two phones, you have a tablet, you have a laptop, you have, maybe you were traveling, so you have two sets of those things. There are lots of things. Assets change, and the way that you have the data management had to change, and we had to preserve and collect that data. And we didn't have to ask permission of the military, but they saw that as that duty. So everything that you do reverberates outside of your one position. That's very stressful.
Yeah.
And at some point in time, my hair started to fall out. And I like having a nice, thick, healthy mane, but it was falling out. And I said to one of the attorneys, I said, "My hair's falling out." And she said, "Oh, honey, everybody's hair falls out. Don't worry, it'll grow back."
Oh, God. Okay.
So what I learned is that, when a president goes in office, he has dark hair, or, he has hair with color. When he comes out, his whole head is gray. But that
Yeah.
applies to the employees too. It applies to the 10,000 people that it takes to support the White House. Many people's hair falls out, or the hair turns gray, or some other thing happens. It's a very stressful. It's like you've worked 10 years in 1 year.
Yeah.
So at the end of that, I was like, where can I go so that I can, it's so funny because for years you hear people say, "Well, I'm leaving the White House to spend more time with my family." And I would think to myself, no, they're not. They got caught in a scandal, or they were fired or something. No, people really are like, "I haven't seen my family in a year or 2 years. I need to go home. So I have to quit this job." And that's just the reality of those high pressure positions. I was in a White House where the president tweeted. So there are a lot of considerations on a day-to-day basis.
I was going to say that probably escalated everything even more. Like that made the stress levels 10 times just by having him.
I mean, it's like with any transition. We weren't accustomed to a president that tweeted, but now, I see the current president's messages on my Instagram feed all the time. It's a transition that we weren't necessarily fully prepared for, that we had to, transition into. So presidents tweet, or I guess X, I don't know what you call it now, but they use social media.
Oh, yeah.
And as the social media platforms change and alter, and the way people use them change, the way you preserve that data and collect that data and produce that data changes too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with all of this change, like, where do you, as you've seen things change over the years, where do you see the industry going next?
Well, I just see the industry growing. It's so interesting, as we are having this debate in my company too about lowering prices. Do you just lower your price and do a rush to the bottom with your pricing? And my argument is the data and what you do with the data and how you analyze the data and the volumes of data are increasing and growing and stretching and morphing into different things. And it's our job to just keep up with that. So yeah, just like the calculator, I remember when my teacher first sent home the notes to all the parents asking for calculators, and believe it or not, it was $600 for a calculator. So this is a very, very long time ago. And I remember my mother's response about this $600 calculator. She was outraged. Everyone was outraged that you had to have a calculator for school. But now a calculator is free on your phone. Or you can get, your tablet has a calculator, your laptop has a calculator, you can download an app for any kind of calculator. Calculators are free. And so this idea that e-discovery and forensics and information, the tools that we use will be, I remember when when you process data, when you collected data, we hosted it. It was like almost $1,000 a gig, and then it quickly went down to $100 a gig. I remember having a contract for $150 a gig for hosting data. When I was at Lockheed, we built at the time, which was the largest database ever. It was a pharmaceutical database with 250 gigabytes. And we laugh at 250 gigs now, but we had never collected 250 gigabytes before. And shortly, like within 2 years of that, of us saying we built the largest database ever, like there were terabytes of failed bank data from the FDIC, terabyte, like 750 terabytes. So we went from 250 gigs. 2 years later, 750 terabytes was more the norm for an agency. So, are you still going to charge $100 a gig when you have 750 terabytes of data? I don't think so. The prices drop, the services change, the software does different things, our skills grow, and the profit is still there. You just have to find a way to get in, open all the doors and get in for the work.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I look at where when automation first came and everyone was like, oh no, it's going to take away our jobs. We can't automate this. And it's just about, as you said at the beginning, about changing your perception, adapting to meet the needs and not just sticking with, okay, this is what I know. I'm not going to adapt at all, because then you won't get anywhere.
Right. And so I tell people, you need to become familiar with ChatGPT. Why? Yeah. Well, here we've had our first attorney sanctioned for using ChatGPT, but not for using ChatGPT. He was sanctioned because he didn't use it properly. So we had an attorney here use ChatGPT to write a brief. And, when the app doesn't know the answer, it hallucinates and it creates an answer. So it created cases that didn't exist and cited real judges where the judge had not actually issued an opinion. It hallucinated a lot. A good portion of this brief was hallucination. And so the attorney was, sent before the bar, and the judge fined that attorney $5,000 and made them write apology notes to the judges. And I say, well, that's a slap on the wrist, because what he was really being penalized for was failing to monitor the way that the app worked. It's just like with LexisNexis. If you do a search in LexisNexis for dog bite, and then you don't read any of the cases, you just throw them all into your brief, you've misused LexisNexis. And that's going to get you sanctioned. If you do the same thing with ChatGPT or with artificial intelligence, you're going to get sanctioned. You have an obligation to monitor tools, to know how they work, to make sure that what's in your brief and in your writings is correct, accurate, and cited for the right purpose. And if if software hallucinates, it's your obligation to catch that hallucination, remove it from the brief, and put in place an actual case. And the attorney didn't do that. But $5,000 is nothing. So the court didn't say you can't use AI. They just said use it properly.
Yeah. Okay. And that $5,000, he probably got paid more. So.
And he got paid more than $5,000 to do a really bad brief that took him very little time. But I think he set the bar for us to say, okay, you can use it, but you need to use it properly. That means you still have to practice law.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Just like if you were doing university or college work, where you would check what you're citing.
Right. Like we can't cite Wikipedia, but if you found it on Wikipedia, you can then track down an actual resource and cite an actual source. And that, using the tools that we have is perfectly acceptable, because that's part of your job. That's part of thinking. And if you don't do it, the other side's going to do it. But you have to pay attention. And that's So I don't think that GPT or AI is taking away our jobs, just like LexisNexis didn't take away our jobs. I swear nothing was more painful than shepherdizing. But a partner told me the other day, nobody shepherdizes anymore. And I was like, really? He said, no. The when you search a case, it has like flags that are colored and it tells you whether or not it's a good law or not. You don't even have to do anything. It just tells, oh, okay, good. Good thing I wasn't a professional shepherd.
You would have just had to adapt. There you go. It goes back to adapt. So I know we're coming up on time now. We've only got 6 minutes left. And so I've got some rapid fire questions for you. So the first thing that comes to your head would be, so I think we know the answer to this one, but AI, friend or foe?
And neutral.
Neutral. Okay. Texting or talking?
It's not a friend, it's not a foe, it's just a tool.
And it's how you use it. There you go.
Texting.
Texting. Okay.
Texting.
Beach or city?
That's good. The beach, the water in the ocean here is over 90 degrees now. And so I'm going to say city because I can find some air conditioning. Can't cool off in the ocean anymore.
What's your current favorite book or TV show that you're reading or watching?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Okay, well, I just got this book and I am going to listen to it on Audible. It's called How Can I Help You by Laura Sims. My understanding is that it's a funny book about two women in a library, and it's both sides of these women working in a library, and it's somewhat of a mystery. I just started it, so wish me luck. My favorite book is 100 Years of Solitude. I found the book to be just joyous in the way that it was written. Not everyone, you either love that book or you hate it. Television shows, I'm looking forward to watching the last season of Billions because I was a huge Billions fan. This is the last season. Love it. So I haven't started yet, but I'm going to try to get it in there. Did you ask me about music?
No, but you can tell me.
I still listen to classical music at home. I seldom listen to the radio. Whenever there's a reference in the media to some song, I always have to look it up because I never know what they are. But I love Lizzo. I just love her, and I'm sorry she's going through all the turmoil that she's going through with being sued. I don't know what the allegations are about, but I just love her.
I listened to this podcast and they were talking all about Lizzo and the situation at the moment. So, but I think everybody has their opinions and everybody has their moments as well. So.
And you don't get to be rich and famous without some speed bumps. So
absolutely, exactly. We've got a fan of Billions in the chat as well. So you're not alone. And if we could end on the best piece of advice that you've been given.
That I've been given.
Yeah.
I would say, children, listen to your parents.
It gets you to where you are today.
Do you hear that, daughter? I would say be flexible, and continuing education is key. Your education is never done. I really wanted to not ever take another class after law school. That is an impossibility unless I wanted to stop working after my first year practicing law. You have to get more training and education along the way every single year for the rest of your life. And that's how you remain relevant in the work that you do.
Absolutely. And is there any last piece of advice that you'd like to give the BYP legal tech community?
Seek each other out and use each other for services. Provide networking opportunities, even if you haven't been asked. A lot of people are afraid to ask for a favor. I have girlfriends who will never ask for anything. And that, I think, as people of color, we have been taught not to ask for anything, that you have to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and do everything on your own. And I would say offer where you can. So if you have services, or you practice in a particular area, or if you're looking for someone to help you with as a vendor, reach out to each other, seek each other out, because we're the only ones that are going to keep us afloat.
Couldn't have said it better. That is the perfect way to end it, Kenya. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining. Look out for the recording of this. Look out for future BYP Legal Tech meetups and events. And just thank you again. Really appreciate this.
Thank you, Karima. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.